Welcome to the Mature Millennials podcast. I'm your host, Pastor Landon Craig, and today we get to talk to Reverend Dr. Jack Gabig. You can call him by his full name, or you can call him Professor Jack, which is usually what I end up calling him because he's my professor at Trinity School for Ministry. And he holds so many titles and so many roles there. I can't even begin to describe to you what it was, but he was one of my professors, which made a wonderful connection. This conversation gets into a bunch of different areas. We talk about how Disney and religion relate, the porn industry, and gardening. It goes so many different areas, and I'm excited for this conversation, for you to hear particularly, because Jack is one of the most generationally attuned person I know. Not only is he understanding of what the generations feel like, what they think like, how they act, but he's lived and worked with millennials. He's lived and worked with Gen Z, Gen X, baby boomers, the I generation. He's been around all these people and he's studied them diligently. So some of the things we get into just directly deal with generational IQ, and that is one of the most unique aspects of this conversation. So please enjoy, without further ado, my conversation with Reverend Dr. Jack Gabig. You're a teacher here at Trinity. Mm-hmm. How long have you actually been at Trinity here?
Full-time, I came 18 months ago. I spent 10 years at Nashotah House, which is another Anglican seminary. It tends to be a little higher, more high church, up in Wisconsin. And I taught adjunct. As soon as I finished my PhD, I taught adjunct here for 2 years. They had a youth ministry training track that was subset to the MDiv. And the guy who'd been running that resigned, and they still had a 2-year pipeline that needed to be emptied, and they asked if I'd come in and do it. And in that time and in that process, something came open at Nashotah, and I went, it's full time. So
that works out. Well, in our last class that you actually had of me, you told me in ministry to kind of have a long career in ministry, you got to have a hobby outside of ministry. You got to get out of the church. You got to get out of your work and go do something else. Yeah. I actually do that right now. I play a lot of hockey.
Oh, cool.
Myself, yeah. It's just
where do you play? Do you play the Teflon rink on?
I live all the way up just above Cranberry, so a little Cranberry deck up there.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I picked up some adult pickup league, and it's been so much fun.
That's good.
It's been so much fun. But what do you do? Because you're in full-time ministry. What do you do outside of this?
2 things majorly. My wife and I are big gardeners. We love to garden. So you can't see it very well, but here's one of our gardens.
Yeah.
In the back.
Oh, wow. I like the brick lay to it, the little bench in the back.
Yeah, it's kind of formal, but a little English formal sort of thing. And then the front is wispy English. And she, Patty's always telling me, you go out in the back. So I'm like, no, we need to prune those bushes. No, you go out in the back. So she likes it wild and wispy, and this is the only place there's any order in my life, so, you know.
It looks quite nice.
So we both love to garden, and I like to haul rocks and split wood and, things like that.
Some hard dig. Labor there.
And she likes to dead hedge. She works for Aveda.
Aveda's
aromatherapy, hair, skin.
Oh, okay, yeah.
She's both a trainer but specialist in cut and color. So it carries over into her gardening. She looks like she's cutting hair when she's out deadheading the flowers. She's trimming it with a pair of scissors. It's hilarious. So that's the one thing. And we, we've only got about 1/3 of an acre, but I'm on a course of getting rid of all grass. Just make it all, gardened out.
Do you have like a winter setup? Like, do you have a greenhouse you do this with?
No. It starts. The first things to come up in the garden are what's called Lenten roses, and they come up late February. And so there's something coming up all the way into the chrysanthemums just kind of died off, and so no, not really. Basically, from late November into late February, there's just nothing. and we stay inside. Other hobby is I love to cook. And we've been married 29 years, and Patty's cooked twice.
She's cooked twice in 25 years.
29, yeah.
29 years.
It's self-preservation. And she doesn't mind. I'm not allowed to do laundry. But I love to cook. I mean, like other people will be like, I'm too tired to cook. No, I go take it out on
that's
vegetables.
Where you get your juices.
Yeah.
Cut everything up.
Yeah.
Like what do you like to make?
Mostly Mediterranean, but eclectic. I mean, all the way around from Spain, southern France, Italy, northern African, all the way out to the Middle East.
Okay.
So, and I did my undergrad in France and Spain, and then have spent a fair amount of time in Europe. So I took classes, and it's just kind of fun. I love to cook, and we love to entertain. So,
so you always have people over.
Yeah.
You're making them some nice Mediterranean dish.
yes.
So do you know how to cook fish really well? Then is that what I hear?
Yeah, I love fish.
Where do you get that around here?
Good fish?
Yeah.
There's a lot of kind of chain restaurants. I know Bonefish Grill and a few others.
Yeah.
But
Like when you cook it though. Like,
where
are you
do I
going
buy
down
it?
to Woolies in the Strip District? Are you?
Giant Eagle, actually, it's expensive, but they go through a lot of it, so it's always really fresh. I go to Woolies, and I grew up in the restaurant business.
Yeah.
So, Restaurant Depot, which is in the Strip, has it
Oh, yep.
pennies on the dollar compared to anyone else. It's a really busy place, so if I go in there, I'm kind of committed to going all the way through and getting all kinds of stuff. But their fish is so inexpensive, and they go through so much so fast that you get on and get, fresh grouper or fresh flounder or whatever.
So is that something that I could go and I gotta go be serious about it? But
No, for Restaurant
okay.
Depot, you'd have to have a not-for-profit card, or you pay your taxes elsewhere.
Yep.
So
all that fun jazz. All
Yeah.
that fun jazz. This is all kind of adding up to make a lot of sense to me. I talked to Shannon right before. It's like, hey, I'm interviewing Jack, and is there anything I should ask him about? Any stories you want to hear about? She's like, oh, just ask him about tea and scarves. He's such a British man at heart. It's all adding up here. I even have a little, yep.
yeah, there you go.
That's wonderful. Not too many people have the stash of tea that you have going on here, the setup of tea.
Yeah.
Where'd you pick that up from? Was it when you were over in Oxford, or?
No, my mother was Irish.
Okay.
And so, I mean, tea was the answer to everything. If you had a bad day or skinned your knee or whatever, it's just, well, just have a cup of tea, So I think that's probably where it started. And then, of course, the Brits drink tea before they go to bed. I mean, they're just like first thing in the morning and last thing before you go to bed.
That's impressive.
constant. So.
No sweet tea though. It's like all natural hot tea.
Oh, they do. I didn't give you sugar.
Oh no, I'm fine.
Yeah. Most Brits will drink it milk, black tea with milk.
Yeah.
I just drink black. Yeah.
And I did wear my probably my one and only scarf I have here. Do you actually wear scarves very often?
Yeah, mine.
Oh.
I brought my new college scarf. In England, I wouldn't wear these. You only wear the scarf for where you graduated from, and I taught here.
Okay, yeah.
So I wouldn't wear this, but I have my Trinity scarf, my King's College scarf, which is where I graduated from. And then I have one from a college that I lived in for a year. And then I have that where I worked for 4 years.
Now hold on, what do you mean you only wear it from where you...
From where you graduate. Like you wouldn't buy like I like, if you're into football and you like Notre Dame, you buy a scarf or a hat. In England, if somebody sees you and recognizes, oh, you're a King's man, it's like,
You do that.
When did you finish? What did you read? It's just.
So it's like an identifying.
Yeah, it's an identifier. Yeah.
Oh, I had no idea.
Yeah. So.
Gotta learn something new every day.
Oh, I'll tell you. So.
Well, okay, I do want to dive in here to just the overarching question. I want to leave it kind of wide open because you have done a lot of research and a lot of work with millennials. Actually, no, you have worked with a lot of millennials. But I want to leave the question wide open for you. I mean, what theology makes mature millennials? Like, what's your first reactions to that?
Consequential faith that makes a difference. Because I think the whole, the moralistic therapeutic deism stuff is like, whatever, yeah, it's out there somewhere. But when faith really makes a difference, if it's not worth dying for, it's not worth living for.
If it's not worth dying for, it's not worth living for.
Yeah, like this defines me, kind of. When Christian faith defines who we are, it's like you start to take a stand and you become anchored in the world rather than blown about by every wind of doctrine.
I mean, do you see that? Do you see that a lot? That we're like millennials are just kind of blown about.
Mm-hmm. I think the whole culture is. I don't think it's just millennials. I really think it starts with boomers who cast off all restraint, and threw off all the institutions and threw off everything, and then as a generation, I think it became pretty controlling. The generation that didn't want anything to do with their parents or throughout became helicopter parents. They're just like, what's that all about?
You're saying the boomers did that?
Boomers did that.
Okay.
And so what happens is that a friend of mine once said the problem with boomer generation was too much catechism and not enough catechesis. They knew the content, but it just never worked into their lives. And I often think head, heart, hands, that would be kind of a St. Augustine sort of approach.
Yeah.
That you, the renewal of your mind and the training of your heart, the passions of your heart.
Yeah.
What it is you desire and the things that you do, you become what you do. And that's, of course, Jamie Smith. If you are what you love, you do the things that are important to you, which shapes your passions and desires, which influences what you know, but that it's an integrated thing. You are what you love, and you do what you love, and you become what you love, for good or for ill.
So good old James K. Smith isn't speaking anything new, just revamping it, is what I hear.
Yeah, and he's a philosopher.
Yeah.
Who happens to be deeply Christian, but he knows philosophy. He's picked up on St. Augustine for us and done some really helpful sorts of stuff. So I'd say consequential faith in the sense that does my faith make a difference, or is it just, whatever, the great whatever. And
so when you say does my faith make a difference, you're saying like the faith that you might have in your head has to go through your heart and out through your hands and actually be doing something. Is that kind of the connection you're making there? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I think people do what they believe what they do more than do what they believe.
You gotta say that one again. Sorry.
People believe what they do.
Believe what they do
rather than do what they believe.
Do what they believe. Okay.
Let's say doctrine. Yeah. Okay.
Sure.
But we don't necessarily apply it. The things we do are what we really believe.
The things that we actually do, like what do you mean the things that we do? Like wake up, go to work?
Well, you can convince yourself that, I often say, if you stay in a locker room too long, you can convince yourself that it smells normal, but it smells like feet and sweat and mold. You know what I mean?
It'd be sad if that was a normal, but yeah.
But so the things we do in terms of consumerism.
Okay.
Do we ever stop to say how much is enough? And do the choices of things that are, without getting like wacky over the top, but the choices we make about how we spend money and how's this tied to slave trade overseas?
Okay.
To say, no, I live for something that, no, this does make a difference, and this is my way of worshiping God, is that nobody else may even notice, but Lord, whatever you do it as unto the Lord. So faith that thinks it all the way through, that goes from the things I do, which starts to affect the things I desire, and vice versa, that goes back and forth, and what I know about. And I mean, just for example, the church is asleep at the switch in terms of pornography, which everybody in the church and out of the church is saying this destroys people, like in terms of their perception, how they treat one another, etc. It's tied to, slave trade, people who make this stuff internationally, and all these sorts of things. This is a generation that's grown up with it. I mean, completely, and it's just normative. I know hanging out with college students, it's not do you look at porn, it's what kind. And I go, wow, okay. Things that I would have been embarrassed. I guess I'm a Gen Xer, because I was the cusp of the boomers, and I didn't want to go this way, so I went that way.
So you went that way.
But that things that I wouldn't have even talked about publicly in high school, partly because of my family upbringing, etc., become pretty common. Folks are like, they just kind of talk like as if this is normal. It's just part of everyday life.
When we say things, are you like specifically referring to porn or other
porn
things?
and sexual behaviors, etc., etc. So thanks for clarifying. Yeah, and I go, ooh, man, I would have been really embarrassed to talk to somebody about that. But it seems pretty blunt. And so that's one thing. And if you do it long enough, whatever the it is, it just becomes normalized. It's just what we do.
So instead of it going from your mind to your heart to your hands, it goes from your hands to your heart to your mind.
And so you start to look at people differently because you participate in these behaviors. What is it John Mayer said? I think it was 2012. They were interviewing.
I remember they did a big thing on John Mayer right around then.
He was talking about having dated Katy Perry, Jennifer Aniston, all these different people. He was engaged several times, etc. And he said, I'm the new generation masturbation. He said, it's far more enjoyable to look at porn and do this than have to deal with people who are so I can go find the quote, but it just floored me. I'm like, oh my goodness. He's like, I'm from this new generation. This is what we do. And he's being interviewed.
From this new. Is he a millennial, or is he just kind of?
Yeah, he'd be a millennial. He'd be the upper end.
Yeah.
But I'd say John Mayer's 38? He's about 38.
He's right around there. So right around the cusp of.
Yeah. So anyway.
Yeah.
But anyway. Yeah.
So you drew the connection. I want to bring it back here because you said one thing in there. So we talked about how the head informs the heart, informs the hand, or it could be the reverse. Yeah. And you went from one thing about consumerism to another about pornography and sexual whatever.
Yeah.
Go back to consumerism because I've experienced, maybe I think it's with millennials, it might just be with the new generation, just a strong move to minimalism, to the extreme. Now, would you say minimalism is taking that thought of trying to be a Christian through and through too far? Like, is that to the extreme, or is that okay?
No, I think minimalism is a good thing. It can be its own religious framework. It can be like this is salvation, rather than I do it out of reverence. Do whatever you do out of reverence for Christ. It can become religious, and religion's important because it frames things. Yeah. We all come from some sort of tradition by which we read the scriptures and celebrate and live life and whatever. But when religion trumps the faith in Christ, if that makes any sense, then it takes on a harshness and becomes
harshness.
Yeah, kind of a fundamentalism, whatever that is, whatever the issue is, whether it's minimalism and I got to keep it simple. Rather than being worship, it's like it becomes dogmatism, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
And people do it with feminism. People do it with all sorts of religious frameworks, where my way of doing theology trumps my relationship with the Lord and whether or not I treat somebody else with dignity, kind of thing. Is that making sense?
It's making a little bit of sense. Yeah. I'm still a little lost there, but
okay. So anyway, in consumerism, we can celebrate. Consumerism can set the tone. One of the things I've done a lot of thinking in my doctorate, and I'm halfway through writing a book that I got to get back to on Disney, how Disney has shaped American Christianity.
Disney. Oh,
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, if you think about Disney in terms of its cultural impact, Disney University teaches
they're
corporations
huge.
how to work, how to systematize, how to do things.
Yeah.
And if you think
Isn't Disney up there like one of the top 3 or 4 major corporations that gives us all of our media?
yeah, they're probably tied to Rupert Murdoch,
Okay, yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
Time Warner. Yeah, they're probably the 5.
Yeah,
within
okay.
the 5. Anyway, has had this profound effect on how we think and live in Western culture, particularly in America. And if we think about Disney, the heart of Disney is the themed environment, which is what they talk about Disneyland. You go, this is the place you go to meet Mickey in the flesh. Mm-hmm. And I just read an article the other day that the Disney's dirty little secret is what it was called. People are going there to spread their ashes. They sneak in with vials
I've heard
full of
that
ashes.
before.
It's the number one honeymoon destination in America, which
It's
used to
number one.
It's number one. It used to be Niagara Falls in the 50s.
Sure, yeah.
And they do some between 3,000 and 4,000 weddings. See, because Disneyland, the way I don't need to get into all of it, but the way it came about, it is its own town.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Because Walt wanted to build this and he couldn't get permits, so he bought all the land and set up a corporation, a board of trustees, and they are the commissioners, and he ended up the mayor. And he asked his commissioners for permission to build Disneyland, and they said, well, sure, boss. Anyway, the point is they have the authority to do weddings. So you can get married by Mickey or Snow White.
I didn't realize that went that far.
Yeah.
Like I knew they have their whole own setup. They have their own fire station, police, jail, court system. They have everything in there.
They have a nuclear power plant.
They have a nuclear power plant in there?
Yeah.
Wow.
Anyway,
Yeah.
in all of that, the way Disney, the heart of it is the themed environment where all the music and the architecture and the colors and the costumes are all telling a story. It's all themed.
Oh, yeah. They want you to feel like you're in a movie at that point.
Right. Well, that's kind of what religion does. When you go to church, the architecture and the symbols and the music and everything's trying to bring you into this thing. So Disney is doing in some ways what religion does. And there's been a fair amount of study on Disney and religion.
Yeah.
And what I've collected data on and been thinking a lot about is doing 5 case studies: commodification of worship,
Okay.
megachurch, which it's not like Disney did this. It's what makes sense in America, that you have greeters and you have, it's the happiest place on earth, and you have the systems and you have people that bring you in, and the parking design. Disney's very intentional about the switchback lines.
Yeah,
Disney invented
they're
that.
for a reason.
While this whole themed environment is going on, there's a system and a way to run it. And subtly, when you go to some mega churches, they're out there doing evangelism. They're doing it, but it makes sense in our culture, the way programs run and the way the worship is set up. Commodification of evangelism through Alpha. Do you know what Alpha is?
Very little.
Okay, Alpha is more for mainline and even Roman churches. It started in Anglican circles.
Yeah.
Alpha is all around the world, and what it does is it creates this environment where you have people in for a dinner and a brief talk. They break into small groups, and anybody can push back. We're not forcing you to answer the questions the way we want. Anyway, there's a whole framework that runs through the basics of the faith. Does God answer prayer?
Yeah.
Who is the Holy Spirit? Do miracles happen? All the way out to... but it's a framework, and it's for sale. Commodification of mission,
Okay.
short-term mission industry.
Go on.
Subtly, I think Urbana isn't really aware how much it's been influenced. You know what Urbana is?
I don't, actually.
Okay, Urbana is InterVarsity. It used to be in Champaign, or Urbana, Illinois.
Okay, yeah.
That now has moved to St. Louis. But it's a missions conference that happens every 2 years. Over Christmas break, all the university students come, and they worship, and there's teaching, and it has really shaped. Well, what cropped up around it are short-term mission industries, where we're your one-stop shop for mission. When did mission become
One-stop
a business?
shop.
We'll set up. We'll coordinate you with the leaders. We'll sell you your airplane tickets. We'll coordinate all your transportation. We'll set up your meals for you. All you need to do is to send us a check, and we take you down. Subtly, and the most interesting thing is, in these big events, you have to go through the bookshop to get to the worship
for sure.
space. Does that sound familiar?
Kind of like Disney. You have to go through the gift shop to get out of every ride.
Same with youth specialties and group publishing events.
Okay.
So you've got commodification of catechesis, and then the growth of Christian theme parks. So commodification of pilgrimage. So anyway, just some thinking.
Oh, I like that.
That this is just, and I'm not saying I don't hate Disney. I marvel at the potency. But subtly, it's bled into the water. This is what makes sense to be Americans.
Now,
Doing
okay.
consumerism.
Now, Disney, okay, going back to the kind of head, heart, and hand things, Disney is one place. They have 5 places around the world. 2 of them are in America. They do have movies, and maybe this is the answer to it. But how do they influence your hands? Like, how do they influence like the way you walk and the way you talk?
The things you buy, what you desire.
Okay.
I mean, if you think, if we just want to play with the Disney and religion motif.
Yeah, go for it.
It has all the same things that a religion has. It has a cast of characters whose life and witness have taught you about the good life.
Yes, it has.
It's got commercial tat to take home to remember, to keep the
little
memory.
memorabilia pieces. Yeah.
Like religious tokens. It's got a place where you can go and meet Mickey in the flesh, and you get swallowed up in the event.
The whole atmosphere and the whole. Okay.
And it's I don't know, just has a lot of elements. Has a mission to the world. If you read their mission statement, they're pretty intentional.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
So anyway.
I remember they actually just recently switched over their famous night show, like in Magic Kingdom. Apparently, it's been this once upon a time for years. I grew up going to Disney every couple of years, but haven't been back there recently. And I went back there and saw a new night show. My wife loves Disney to the extreme, so I know so much about Disney. It's ridiculous. And I learned about this new night show, and I sat there watching it. I'm like, they are telling. It essentially ended up being like a blatantly un-Christian story in the night show. Walked away. I was talking to a couple of friends about it, talking to people I was with about it. And they're like, what do you, it was just a good show. Like, the lights, they had cameras, they had everything. I'm like, no. They're telling a story with that. With the night show, with the theme park, with everything they're doing. They're telling a story.
The narrative, exactly right. What's interesting, somewhere over there, is a sociologist wrote a book called Jesus in Disneyland, and all he does is he titled the book after it and doesn't deal with Disney at all. But where it came from was all about consumerism and technology and these various things that have shaped us.
Yeah.
But what struck him was he went to Disneyland and noticed it was Evangelical Christian Day. And so they had...
Evangelical Christian Day in Disneyland.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so what it is kind of like they'll have their gay day parades or they'll have whatever. This is the day that's designated for evangelical Christians. And they had preaching all day. At different stations, and people were in right outside the Hall of Presidents preaching about the Founding Fathers being Christians and all this sort of stuff. And it was a celebration where families would come to Disneyland for the day to celebrate their evangelical Christian faith. And it was like, oh my goodness.
Wow.
So, and he caught on. It was like, what on earth? Like, this isn't public theology. This is just... we've been slotted into, this week is Family Week. This is LGBTQ week with parades, and this one is Evangelical Christian Day, and this week happens to be, whomever. And he just was like, I need to kind of think about what's going on in the postmodern shift. It's old.
Yeah.
Christians, the church is the only one still talking about postmodernism.
Sure.
Because it's just a given, but
Sure.
So
I one advantage I have of kind of having these conversations is that I am a millennial. Are we good on time here? For a little bit? Yeah. So one of the advantages is I am a millennial. So I kind of grew up, I'm seeing this all. I don't have to step outside myself to ask questions. It's nice to compare Disney to the church, but kind of growing up, I was very low church, grew up in an Alliance church, loved it, and now I'm rolling up, and I don't, I'm thinking, I'm trying to filter this through and like transfer it to my everyday life. I actually tend to avoid carrying crosses, carrying little trinkets of Christianity or anything from the church. I go to a church that we don't dress up in different colors. We all kind of come as we are. A lot of the churches I go to don't have the kind of traditional memorabilia that the churches used to have, like the Noah's Ark ceiling and just those kind of symbolisms to it. So I'm not seeing the direct connection between my everyday and the way I live my faith. When we're comparing a lot to Disney World, where we're remembering with trinkets, we have memories, we have videos to watch. I'm sitting there like my pretty low church experience, being like, I don't have like an everyday thing. So my question to you, with all that background to it, like what do I step into every day and say, this is how I make my faith consequential. This is how my faith actually matters to me in my everyday. Like what daily practices should I pick up? Do I have that I don't even know I have?
Certainly, we live out of a narrative. And that's the scriptures. Going back to Disney, that is a narrative that's being played out in front of me. And that narrative plays out in the lives of what we've seen in saints of the Bible or folks who have shaped our traditions, whether it's Roman and you've got a whole bunch of formal capital S saints, or more Protestant with Martin Luther, who set the tone for that tradition, or Calvin, or whomever. Alliance would be Tozer.
Okay, yeah.
Tozer totally sets I love Tozer. Totally sets the tone for the way we kind of locate ourselves in the world and the way we interact. I mean, Tozer, just his sense of piety and some of the books he wrote, Man, the Dwelling Place of God, and just boatloads of his books have to do with our personal piety and our personal practices and how we ground ourselves. That comes forth from the narrative. So I would say, if we want to go back to Disney, there is a narrative, there are saints, there are these practices that we tend to do that end up shaping us. That just in terms of the stories we watch and the things we buy and those sorts of things.
So even if I'm in some non-denominational church, I still have the narrative of the Bible that I'm trying to live into. I still have people before me, even if they're not attached to my denomination per se, there's still Christian people before me I can look to and see what's going on.
And then within the local congregation, the pastor, the matriarch, the folks who set the tone, that you watch their faith unfolding in front of you and mimic and participate with them, we become what we do.
Okay.
And that's where I say the things we do end up thank you, Jamie Smith, end up shaping. We do what we love, and we love what we do, and we end up becoming what we do. We end up becoming what we love. And so going back to consequential faith, to think through what does my faith tell me about the way I live? And the two categories that I always think of for millennials is high tech, high touch. In terms of theological categories.
High tech, high touch.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a high tech world. We got to understand where people actually live. And there's a certain sense in which the minimalist movement is still involved in, this is a game shaper. This has changed. This is training us. By
phone,
this, I'm talking about the smartphone.
Yeah.
It has trained us. So you go on Pinterest and you get, there's a story being told. This is the good life. And you go, oh man, I got to have that. And you can buy it right there.
Oh, okay.
And so it ends up shaping our behaviors. And instead of pulling back and going, no, I don't need that right now. That's interesting, but
so every time you pick up a smartphone, it's telling you a narrative that you can either choose to buy into and literally probably buy, or
discipline yourself to say how much is enough, how much screen time, because this one device. There's a book out called "One Device to Rule Them All." This one device, it used to be you'd carry around a backpack or a purse. You had maybe a couple pictures, and you had a camera, and you had your calendar, and you had some books, and you had a map, whatever else. This one device rolls everything into it, and even one of the things I discovered in looking into this is that maps used to be static and you located yourself in the map. Now the map builds itself around you.
Yep.
And Google will take me and you, if we both typed in a GPS or maybe Google Maps or whomever else, Google saves every search you've had, where you spent your money, what credit card you used, et cetera, has all of that. So it will take me down a different street than you based on my purchases and my Google searches.
Really? It'll just so I might run across a store that I go and buy something?
They say, at least in what I've read, said that one out of every, for every Google search, for every map, every time you pull up, GPS, global positioning, and it has sorts of restaurants you go to, sort of hotel, the sorts of shops you visit, etc., says that for every one visit into a map where you're getting directions, 20% of the people who do that end up stopping to purchase.
20%.
That I don't. I on my sabbatical, I got a stack of about 25 books on this because it was coming up on the 10-year anniversary.
10-year anniversary of the iPhone.
Yep. And I was like, I want to see what this has done to us. And I was floored because I was driving back from Chicago with a friend, and we were both coming across 80. We both typed in, and we got two different sets of directions as we're driving across 80.
I've never tried that.
That she was getting, I was getting go across, I think it's 14 that runs just south of 80 through Indiana. And it's more towns and streets and stoplights. You run at about 50 miles an hour. 80 up here has lots of traffic. And there was a fair amount of construction. It was this summer. And we both got different sets of directions. And the next day I came home, I thought, this is just so bizarre. It kept wanting me to go down and take 14.
Yeah.
And I'm passing up exits. You've missed your exit, recalculating. And we're driving across 80, and she's getting straight on 80. Meanwhile, they want to take me across 14. And that weekend, I pulled up and was reading some books, and I read an article, and I'm like, that almost sounds evil. It almost sounds evil. It's like you're so invested in my life, and I don't even know it.
No.
So anyway, sorry, we keep veering off because I'm always doing the cultural thing.
I'm fine. No, I think that's wonderful. I think you're really good at that. So why not?
Yeah. So anyway, I just think consequential faith, where it really felt like it makes a difference. What difference does it make? What difference does the church make if it just closed doors and went away? Does it make any difference in this neighborhood? Would it make any difference in the lives of people? Or would they just go find something else to do on Sunday? That's what I often ask myself. Do we make
a difference in the neighborhood?
Does it make a difference? That's consequential faith.
Yeah.
And so it starts to influence what we do with consumerism, what we do with how do we make moral decisions.
Yeah.
Because certainly the whole moralistic therapeutic deism thing that came out of the National Study of Youth and Religion, which is about millennials, was that the people believe the plumb line for their decisions is about whether or not they're happy.
Happiness is the plumb line for decisions.
Yeah, for moral decisions.
Yeah.
And so
Now, real quick, can you give me a brief description of more therapeutic deism? Because I can explain it, but it takes me about 20 minutes to do it justice.
Sure. The National Study of Youth and Religion was a longitudinal study that was done with several thousand kids when they were in high school, and then every 5 years they returned when they were in college, when they were coming out of college, and now that they're settling in and having families, and then they put a wrap on it with the sense that they believe they understand this generation. And they interviewed, in the first run, they interviewed 20-minute interviews with millennials who were coming of age, or who had just come of age, they were in high school, and 20-minute interviews with their parents, and then crunched the data. So it was a lot of data. And then they did 4-hour video interviews with 10% subset of that, so 365 students. And what they did was looked at it and said that whether you're Jewish or Muslim or Christian or whatever, the majority of teenagers at that time were moralistic therapeutic deists. That means moralistic deist, that God, there is a God who's out there, kind of the watchmaker thing, who interacts with the world, but it's not terribly involved. Prayer does make a difference. God swoops in and fixes things, but God doesn't really want to be caught up in the mundane of your life. Just call on Him when you need Him. Therapeutic, the thing that God wants you to do is to work out your stuff. So that moralistic, moral is the everyday. So that God wants you to work out your stuff so that you can be happy. So the principles are, there's a God who created and orders things, who wants everybody to be fair and nice and happy, who swoops in to fix things, but doesn't want to be involved. And the end goal in life is ultimate happiness here and now. It's perfect religion for a consumer society. Anyway, in that, if that's not the gospel, that's not. What do I do with suffering? Suffering is actually good for you. I don't want to desire suffering, but all things work for the good, and God is at work in my suffering. Consider it all joy, my brothers, when you suffer any trials, and onward. I mean, there's lots of theology of suffering throughout Isaiah and throughout James and Peter and Paul.
Tons of suffering.
Consequential faith gives us hope in the midst of suffering to say God is doing something here. And consequential faith says, what about the choices I make about sexuality? What I think sexuality is all about. Is it about my happiness? Because studies show that people aren't happy. Does it make any difference for how I make moral choices beyond just sexuality, but moral choices of consumerism? What about community? What about these various things when what we're seeing is such heavy isolation? So I guess go back to the high-tech, high-touch thing. It's a high-tech world which has an epistemology attached to it. We need to understand how life operates in the 21st century and be realistic about it. Because, this has shaped us and shapes our desires, shapes our practices, shapes the way we perceive what life is all about. I think we tend to see ourselves more as consumers than producers. And we hang out with people that consume like we do, rather than people who produce like we do. And I think the answer is high touch. Live in a real high-tech world, but we got to up the game on the incarnation, that the Word became flesh, that God is not ignorant of what it's like to be human. He gets it. He is down to the dregs. He has drunk of humanity to the point of suffering and dying for something He didn't do in Christ. And that's a message that starts to produce consequential faith that says, so you get this, and you care, and you're present, and all things are working for the good, How do I hold on? Let me hold your hand. And so we, in consequential faith, start to live out in community instead of isolated by ourselves in the corner with our smartphones, absorbed in Netflix and whatever else, all of which is good. I love it.
Yeah, it's fine.
But it's the real world we live in. We start to say, yeah, but the incarnation trumps. The incarnation of Christ.
Incarnate yourself and the incarnation of Christ.
And living into, we are fully embodied beings. Like God is at work in this very body. And the promise is we're going to have a new heaven and a new earth and a new body.
Yeah.
And God himself is going to wipe away every tear. Like, crawl up on my lap here. Come here, kid. Oh, man.
I can't wait.
So I think, again, I keep going back to say consequential faith, but faith that is really embedded in, it really makes a difference in the here and the now, that I'm not going to escape this body. No. We're not going to escape new heaven and the earth. God's recreate all of it. And N.T. Wright says that from his perspective, his read of the scripture is, in eternity, we're going to be living right here in all of its fullness and perfection when God finishes the renewal. That we're not going off to play harps, sit on some cloud. Yeah. Like what you see here is going to be brought to its fullness and perfection, and we're going to celebrate and we're going to be living. And I think that when we taste that, here and now, and then we taste it in the lives of others, and that's where what's really important to millennials is authenticity. When you can say, I really struggle with this, and I really hurt over that, but I know God's involved, and I know he has not abandoned me, and I know that my Redeemer lives, and at the end I shall see him, not as another, I will see him with my own eyes, as Job tells us, is a game changer. Just kind of turns it on its ear. And you can afford to be yourself. You can afford to be our messy, broken, tortured selves, and know that God is right involved in it, and I don't have to perform for him, and it helps me not have to perform for you, so that I don't have to live a consumeristic, perfect Christian life. I'm a mess.
Cheers and amen. Absolutely.
And the thing I know in my 35 years of walking intently. I mean, I've always had a measure of faith. My parents raised me in it, but when I came to want to live it myself, the thing I've learned over the years is that my Heavenly Father's very fond of me, and I don't have to perform. Like that runs so deep that I think it becomes infectious when the church just extends hospitality and lives out in its brokenness with genuine hope, and praise and trust and accountability.
So I was about to jump in there, and because I realized a lot of our conversation has been around it just kind of ended up being more the negative side of, you need to be careful not to consume in the wrong way. You need to be careful not to do this or do that in the wrong way. I was going to flip it on the positive and say, well, what are some active things? Like what are some things with our hands that we can be doing to influence our heart and our head? And you lived it out. You laid it out right there. You live in community. You be intentional. You tell people you're really messed up and my God loves me.
Yeah, I wish the church were more like the 12 steps. I mean, 12 steps has its limits, but people involved in recovery, and there's a certain, as it were, theology that says all sin is addiction. It's just, which poison have you picked? But the way the steps allows people to be where they are and calls people out when they're blowing smoke and still loves them. Says, yeah, I don't believe you. I think you're full of crap.
Yep.
But you're loved and lovable. And, you know, if you want to deal with that, I'm in your corner.
That is a nice positive take. I've heard a lot of negative takes on the 12 steps, but I see a lot of positive in it, and I agree with you there.
Yeah.
Definitely agree with you there. Well, Jack, this is wonderful. This has been fantastic. I really appreciate you sitting down with me and just talking about consequential faith. I mean, that I see that, and it plays out in authenticity. It plays out in people I admire, people I look up to. So I appreciate you bringing that to light. I personally, I hate when I connect and listen to somebody that I like and that I connect with, and then not be able to follow them afterwards. So do you do any writing on websites? Do you do any publishing? Do you have any books out? Oh, besides the book you're writing right now.
I can't wait to get back to the book that I'm reading, let alone the one I'm writing. One of the things that I don't know, in all the practical and pastoral theology, I always prefer people to writing. And I really do want to write. I've got a couple things, and I will do some things this summer.
I always prefer people than writing. I love that. That's wonderful.
The one thing that has been a gift is that my life's pretty busy. Whatever I'm doing is what I'm doing. I just put it all in a little box, put it on the shelf. Hopefully I can get to it, or the second coming will happen before I need to. But if I sit down with somebody, it's this is what's happening right now.
Yeah.
And so I tend to err on the side of if I'm going to leave a mark on the world, I'd rather leave it in someone's flesh and blood and relationship.
That's a wonderful philosophy, by the way.
I put out a chapter. It's at the publisher now. I don't know if you've ever heard of a book that came out called Coming Revolution in Youth Ministry. Came out 25 years ago.
I have not.
Okay. Oh, gosh. It's terrible. Mark? Oh, that's terrible.
I can't remember the author.
Yeah.
We'll look it up.
I'll get there.
Not a big deal.
Anyway, they decided to the thesis was that every 50 years in America, the culture shifts and there's a revolution in how youth work is done. From the Sunday school movement to Dwight Moody and the Saturday night rallies to Young Life. He maps it as in a story, and he maps it out. He said, here's what brews, here's the crisis that happens, here's how it changes. And they want to test it out. We're 25 years into this thesis. And so they wrote a bunch of different models, and I wrote a chapter on the catechetical model, which is head, heart, hands.
Yeah.
For how that looks, what that looks like when I do youth ministry. And that's due out sometime this year. I don't know when. I've got my Disney thing that I need to finish. But I killed all social media.
Did you?
Yeah, slowly over the past 5 years.
All gone.
I decided I got sick of Facebook.
Yeah, understandably
Then
so.
I killed Snapchat. And then the last one was Pinterest, which I decided did little more than cultivate lust and covetousness for me. Because I would see it and I go, oh man, it's just not helpful. So I killed it all. I've killed all social media. So if anybody wants to, come have tea at Trinity.
Come have tea, come enroll. That's wonderful. Thank you, Jack. I appreciate it.
Peace, man.